Fantastic. So for those of you sticking around, for us, it looks like we have about 379 folks with us today. So good morning, welcome if you're just joining us, or thanks for sticking around if you are joining us for our second hour of presentations. We're going to be discussing results-based monitoring risk analysis and how to track your risk. Do want to mention that the risk analysis information for FY25 is not quite public yet, but we're hoping to have that up by the very beginning of September, if not by the end of this month. So look for that notification in the coming weeks. I am going to take a portion of this presentation, and then I will be joined by my great colleague, Michael Gately. So thank you for joining us to discuss our monitoring risk analysis process. So all of us together are responsible for all of the pillars of work that you see here on this slide. We know that all of you have a hand in academics, student readiness, and educators, and it's also our responsibility to support you in each of these endeavors to ensure that you have compliant and effective programs upon which to build. So today we are going to go in this order. We'll do an overview, then we'll discuss ESSA and IDEA. Michael will discuss CTE and Fiscal. We'll discuss cross-cutting, years since last monitored, common questions, and our business rules. So without further ado, let's just dive on in, shall we? You can't tell, this is one of my favorite topics to discuss, because all of us have the ability to control some of what is in the risk analysis, and some of it we just don't have control over. But if you're ever wondering, well, why on earth, Geneva and Michael, do you conduct a risk analysis? Why aren't we just monitored on a cycle? Well, the answer to that can be found in our good friend Purple Edgar under 2 CFR 200.331. It says that we must evaluate each subrecipient's risk of noncompliance for the purposes of determining appropriate monitoring. So in Tennessee, we have 3 different levels of monitoring. And so to determine the appropriate level of monitoring, we look at approximately 50 or so risk factors that will divide all of the LEAs in the state into one of 3 levels. Level 3 being our most significant, which is our in-person monitoring for both schools and LEAs. Our level 2 monitoring, which is our elevated risk, which is our virtual process at the LEA level with a conversational component. And level 1, which is our monitoring tier for our lowest risk LEAs. So our risk analysis works by being divided into sections. We have an ESSA, an IDEA, a Perkins of Finance, a cross-cutting / other, and a year since last monitored section. Each of those scores are tallied up, and then we follow a set of business rules to determine which LEAs are being monitored. So let's dive into the ESSA subcategory together. And we will discuss subgroup data, complaints, growth rates, grad rates, results-based monitoring, and years of experience. So you can see here highlighted, we've added English learner grad rates as a risk component for LEAs that have data that we can use for that. And it follows the same grad rate rules as our other grad rate risk analysis areas. So here, we're looking at subgroup data for English learners, and we have our definition on the left-hand side, and that aligns with the risk analysis guide that will be coming out for FY25. But basically, what we do here is we look to see if your number of English learners has increased or decreased by 10% or more. And by 2 or more if you're a smaller LEA, because just 2 students can really impact what your service levels look like in your LEA, and it can create some complex schedules, especially for using an itinerant teacher to cover multiple schools within your district. If you meet the metric, you have no risk, so you receive 0 points. If you do meet this, if you have this risk, your population is increased or decreased, then there's a maximum of 10 points. Your mitigation strategy here really is just to ensure that you have accurate data. There's really nothing else that you could or should do here. Make sure that you're accurately identifying your students, that you are accurately serving these students. No one would ever not report an English learner just to avoid these points. That would not be the reason that you would be monitored or not monitored. Just one category by itself would not ever cause an LEA to be or not to be monitored. Similar for foster care, if it equals 10% or less of the state average in your particular LEA, it just means that your data is varying quite a bit compared to your counterparts across the state. So if you are meeting that metric, you get 0 points. But if you are less than or equal to 10% of the state average, then you're going to be receiving those 10 points. And it's just an indicator for us to have a conversation with you during the monitoring process about your foster care data. So again, your mitigation strategy here is to ensure that your data is accurate. So you're going to see a theme throughout this process. For students experiencing homelessness, same, 10% or less than the state average. The likelihood could be that their program quality could be impacted if you do not have accurate data here. So we ask that you just review your data, make sure it's accurate, and that's really your only mitigation strategy for students experiencing homelessness and your subgroup data. These elements are required for us to collect and report on to US Ed, which is one of the reasons why they are in our risk analysis process. For immigrant students, we want to make sure that all students have a country of birth listed. If you have a country of birth missing, that will earn some risk points here. If you have marked a student who was born in Puerto Rico or in the United States, as an immigrant, then that would also add to your risk here. We again want to make sure that our data is accurate. You can compare it to your student information system and to the data reports that's shared by the lovely Trish Kelly. Very similar for migratory students. We are looking for migratory students in which they needed corrections to their classification if it affected 10% or more of your students, and 2 or more students at the end of the school year. So if we waited all year and we still didn't fix it, then that's going to contribute to risk at the LEA level as well. Notice that all of these are just 10 points apiece, which is rather small when compared to some of our other categories that we will get to a little bit later on. Military dependents. Although we do not receive specific funding to assist with military dependents, this is a required reporting category to US Ed, so it's important that we turn our attention to make sure that our data is accurate. Some of us across the state have bases or forts or other areas nearby us, which will increase the number of military dependents naturally in our school districts, while others may be quite far away. So it's very possible that a district would receive subgroup data points here for not meeting the metric and it still be accurate, which is why I ask you to not panic, but to review your data very regularly when Trish is sending that out to you, and compare that to your student information system to make sure things are flowing through correctly. So we're going to navigate away from our subgroup data area here for a moment, and let's talk about ESSA complaints with findings. So this is not just that someone complained about your LEA. Someone has to not only log that complaint with the Department of Education, but also it needs to be investigated and result in findings of noncompliance. If an LEA has no complaints with findings, then those are 0 points. Again, this is like golf. The lower your score, the less at risk you are. So you do not want points if you can mitigate them. Making sure that you work with your parents and families, your non-public schools, other entities to ensure that your programs are being implemented positively impacts your eligible students. Making sure that you are working with parents of students experiencing homelessness, not chilling their enrollment or adding barriers to their enrollment. All of those strategies help reduce the likelihood that you will receive a complaint with a finding. For WIDA growth rate, since this data is coming from previous years, we are using WIDA growth rate. English learners that met the growth standard is our definition. If they did not meet this standard and 10 or more English learners have test scores for 2 years, then the LEA will receive 15 points here. We know that a lack of growth and stagnation in an ESL program indicates program quality concerns, non-compliance with federal law or state board rule. So your mitigation strategy here would be to monitor your programs regularly, update your ILPs, conduct your needs assessments in a timely manner. And if a strategy is not working, let's adjust that strategy based on each individual student's need. If you need assistance with that, obviously you could reach out to Hannah Gribble or any of our other wonderful English learner folks here at the Department of Ed. Our new category here is English learner grad rate. This is going to be very similar to foster care and the others. But basically, we're looking at a grad rate risk flag. If that flag shows us that English learner students' graduation rate is equal to 38%, and the cohort is 5 or more students. So we're looking at that grad rate. If it's less, then we know that our English learners are not meeting their goals. They're less likely to graduate. So we want to make sure that we're very involved, and to mitigate that, we are supporting students with their goals. We are communicating not only with the ESL teacher, but with their general education teachers. We're communicating with their families, and we're supporting them through that graduation process. For foster care, we're looking for a graduation rate that is less than or equal to 36%, and that you have 5 or more students. If that's the case, that low graduation rate indicates a lot of risk for us. We know that students in foster care, unfortunately, the more often they move from school to school, the less likely they are to graduate, which is absolutely heartbreaking. And what we can do is prioritize our students' needs and make it easy for them to accomplish credit recovery. We can review transcripts and make sure that we are giving them credit for closely aligned classes. For our high school students, we're making sure that they're in a very similar program of study in CTE, and providing supplemental support such as tutoring. All of those strategies increase the likelihood of graduation. Our homeless grad rate is equal to or less than 44%. We also know that students experiencing homelessness or that are in transition are more transient, of course, than their peers. They are more likely to need additional supports in order to graduate. And unfortunately, a lot like our students who are in foster care, the more often they have to move, the less likely they are to graduate, which is why educational stability is so important here. We want to make sure that we're identifying our student needs. We're providing them services such as backpack programs, food, resource assistance, helping them find stable housing, working with our community stakeholders to reduce barriers. We want to make sure that we are waiving fees, providing school supplies, and anything else that we can possibly do. So creating a needs assessment that you conduct with the student or the family, depending on the age of the student, to see what their needs are and make sure that that's custom for each student just goes such a long way for helping our students experiencing homelessness. In all categories, we have results-based monitoring action steps listed. These are LEAs with findings of noncompliance or corrections needed. That also includes our JDC and N&D results from FY23 monitoring forward. That has also been included. Our risk points for this are 2 points per action step, not per finding, with a maximum of 20 points per subcategory. So if you had 10 or more action steps, you're going to top out at 20 points. And that is so that we're leveling the risk out just a little bit, and we're not having LEAs be monitored via level 3 over and over and over again to give you a chance to positively impact your data. So reviewing your previous monitoring results, whether or not you were employed last year when monitoring occurred, you can go back through ePlan and look at that historical documentation. You can also review policies and procedures to make sure that they match up and keep your documentation that proves that you were compliant for that previous school year. This is also a category that impacts all areas, so not just ESSA, but IDEA, CTE, and our cross-cutting area. All directors must report their years of experience within their role within Tennessee upon submission of the applicable funding application each year. We ask that you not chill that information. It is very vital to report that as soon as it happens. We are seeing a trend of people waiting to submit that data to us. And all that does is delay the monitoring process by a year. The next year, you'll have to report that you have 0 years of experience when really you have 1. And to be honest with you, it is a wonderful experience to be monitored when you are early on in your career in a particular setting, because you're going to get confirmation from our monitoring team that you are doing the right thing, you have inherited the right work, or that you're not, and then we'll give you a lovely little list of action steps and provide some support to you to make sure that your program is on a foundation of compliance. We ask that you not assume that inherited work is correct. Keep your documentation, reach out for support from oversight coordinators, get involved in their office hours, their meetings, and your regional meetings as well. In FY26, we will be updating this to years of experience in the role within the LEA. So it will no longer be within the state of Tennessee. So it'll be within the role within the LEA. So if you move from LEA to LEA, we especially know that our very small districts, our state specials, our special school districts versus our large urbans, they run very differently from each other. And again, you can't assume that inherited work was correct. You can't just adopt all of the policies and procedures that you used at your last LEA and expect them to work out perfectly. So we will be making that adjustment within ePlan. LEAs that have multiple staff members listed receive risk based on the newest person added, because there's an assumption there that the person with the more experience is the one that's leaving the role, the one with the least experience is the one joining in. For IDEA, want to cover a few things that are new and updated. Specifically, we are adding in an element for APR 3B and APR indicator 5A to add additional emphasis to those items. We've updated the expectations for isolation and restraint incidents. We've updated IDEA complaint findings and due process final orders, and we've also split out IDEA due process resolution from the one that I just mentioned. So again, additional emphasis on APR, and then our isolation and restraint incident times for isolations that exceed 60 minutes, that's going to add to risk. For restraints that exceed 5 minutes, that is going to contribute to risk as well. Some of our more complex areas lie in this, this section. So want to cover APR. Your final APR score, for those of you that are IDEA directors on the line, the higher your score, the better off you were according to your annual performance report. Well, since results-based monitoring risk uses a low score indicates less risk, we have to invert your APR score. So they will never match point for point. And then we also give a maximum of 50. So if your score was 88, then you would inverse that and make it a 12, for example. If you need to mitigate in this area, we ask that you review APR manuals and the data, contact our friends over in our Special Populations Division. Folks in CORE also really support this work and help reduce non-compliance as well. For specifically indicator 3B, sorry, We are looking at whether or not LEAs are meeting the target in the following areas. So English language arts, grades 4 and 8 assessment proficiency. Math, grades 4 and 8 assessment proficiency. End of course for English language arts assessment proficiency change, and the same for math, end of course. You would receive 1 point for each missed target area with a maximum of 4 points. This is an additional emphasis in addition to that overall APR score, because this is a target that Tennessee is really trying to ensure that all LEAs are meeting and exceeding on. And again, just ensuring accurate data collection, that you're having the correct IEP meetings, you're involving the right folks in these conversations is very, very important. For indicator 5A, we are measuring the LRE, the least restrictive environment placement measurement for students with disabilities inside the regular classroom. We are wanting to see 80% or more per day. The target was 74.92 this previous year. So LEAs that are at or above 74.92 receive 0 risk points. For LEAs that have 70 to 74.91, 1 point, 60 to 69.99 is 3, and below 60 is a maximum of 5. So it's like a stair-step situation. We know that if students are not in their least restrictive environment, that it is very unlikely that they are spending the amount of time appropriate with their non-disabled peers, which is so important for not only academic development, but also social emotional development as well. IDA complaints with findings and due process final orders. This one has been adjusted a little bit. So when the department in the Office of General Counsel receives a complaint, obviously they conduct a review and investigate. And if that review results in findings, this is how the risk points will be applied for this year. So due process final order judgment, 25. If there's 1 complaint, but it's not FAPE, 10 points. 1 complaint, it is FAPE, 25 points. 2+ complaints, 25 points. So your mitigation strategy here really is to just review your IEPs and your companion documentation. Ensure your program decisions are based on student need rather than your current program offerings, and make sure that you're documenting your decisions and supports as an IEP team and involving the student when applicable, and parents and other folks that are appropriate to invite to the IEP team discussions. IDA due process resolution is new this year. The definition here is that LEAs must convene a resolution session within 15 calendar days of receiving a due process complaint, or 7 calendar days if you receive an expedited complaint. If an LEA fails to offer to convene 1 or more due process resolution sessions within those required timelines, the LEA will receive 10 points. It's important that the LEA meet student needs, and when these complaints are not substantiated, it would be impossible. And you're also increasing the likelihood of risk in other programmatic areas by not holding these resolution sessions. Significant disproportionality. Here our definition is that we collect and examine data to determine if significant disproportionality is based on race, ethnicity, if that is occurring in the state and LEAs. We also look at identification, placement, incidences. And so for these areas, we apply 4 points per area of significant disproportionality with a maximum of 20 points. So if you have beyond 5 areas of significant disproportionality, you max out at that 20. For IEP monitoring risk, we have noticed a trend where many LEAs are beginning to have less risk during their IEP compliance monitoring, which is fantastic. You'll see here in section number 2, our risk points for percentage of noncompliance. So we review the number of areas that we've reviewed over the number of areas that, We review the number of areas of noncompliance over the number of areas that we reviewed in total, and we calculate that percentage of noncompliance. So here you can see it starts off with 0 to 9.99% at 0 points. And then if you're above 30% noncompliance, meaning 1/3 of the items that we reviewed were noncompliant, then you can max out at 50 points. Want to make sure that you are reviewing IEP monitoring protocols, you are norming with your IEP teams on decision making, providing training and documenting that. Those are really your risk mitigation strategies there. Isolation and restraint incidents we discussed earlier. Want to really point out here on this slide that if isolation exceeds 60 minutes or restraint exceeds 5 minutes, those are some adjustments. We're also looking at duplicate entries, that we're missing the parent notification time, that there is a death reported when no death occurred. You're missing the staff not trained versus total staff numbers, or that incidents reported during non-school hours. So make sure that you have a person identified to review isolation and restraint incident reports. Make sure that you are reviewing that all of the right boxes were checked, all of the right data was entered. We want to make sure that you are training frequently on de-escalation techniques to reduce the use of isolation and restraint, and obviously seek department support when needed. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Michael Gately, to discuss Perkins 5.
Hello. Yep, I'm back here. So Perkins 5 subcategories. We'll start off here with CTE director, professional development attendance, RBM results, and years of experience, and then PD allocations. So for the PD, there's mandatory attendance at both state and regional CTE directors meetings. We have 4 quarterly state meetings, and then often there are monthly meetings in each region. If CTE directors cannot attend those, we suggest that they send designees. That should not be the norm, though. That should be in case of maybe you're double booked, or there is an emergency, that kind of thing. Receiving that information firsthand is best practice. So directors who attend less than 75% of state meetings are going to get 10 points on the risk analysis, and then less than 75% for regional meetings also will receive 10 points, with a maximum of 20 points here. Again, there's important information shared at these meetings, so very important that CTE directors attend and get that information. To mitigate the strategies, make all efforts to attend or send a designee. All right, for CTE director years of experience, this goes along with our other areas. Directors have to report their years of experience within the CTE local application. There's a place where they put the starting date in that role. So for this area, risk is going to be, risk points are going to be 3 years or more. They're going to be 0 points there. 1 to 3 years, you get 2 points, and then less than 1 year of experience, you get 5 points. The timeline is going to be aligned for this as far as the date, the cutoff date. That's going to be on an annual basis, usually July 1st of the current fiscal year is what we base that on. Significance here is the less experience you have in a role, there's going to be more risk associated with noncompliance. So mitigation strategies here: don't assume inherited work is correct. Make sure that you're attending those meetings we just talked about. Keep documentation on all of your policies, procedures, activities, and reach out to support from the CTE core consultants, for myself, or other CTE directors when applicable. So CTE PD allocations. So the LEA has to allocate at least 5% of the Perkins basic allocations to PD, as I discussed earlier, if you were with us. If there are less than 5% total allocation for this, you will get 5 points. Usually ePlan should catch that as an error if you try to allocate less than 5% PD, but we know sometimes those funds don't get expended as they are planned to be expended, maybe due to changes at the end of the year. So those funds used to provide PD opportunities are going to increase skill sets and tools for CTE educators and for CTE directors. So very important to include all of the funds there. 5% again is the minimum. You can spend more than that. Use PD allocation data to compare years where PD allocations were lower or higher, and look at the core indicators of performance that we have to try to make decisions on where those funds should be spent and where CTE educators should be sent as far as PD goes. All right, so we're going to move on to our fiscal subcategories. So we have several categories here. I'll give you a second to read through those, and then we'll jump right into the changes and improvements. Okay, so for single audit findings, so this is going to provide assurance to the U.S. government as to the management of the funds that recipients receive. This category captures LEAs that receive less than $750,000 in federal funds. So greater than one single audit finding is going to give 15 points for this. We know that audit results are directly connected to allowable expenditures. To mitigate strategy here, ensure that all of fundings or spending is necessary, reasonable, allowable. You can look at your Edgar books or ecfr.gov to figure out what does that mean, necessary, reasonable, and allocable. They define them there, and make sure that you document. So anytime money is spent, we should be documenting how it was spent and then keeping all the associated documentation on the different elements there. So annual financial report findings. So the LEAs that are identified during the annual financial report as exhibiting financial risk is what this category deals with. So for any 81 Act counties, all school findings will be applied to the applicable LEA. So there will be 10 points per finding, and there's going to be a 50-point max in this category. So the comptroller reports are going to include 81 Act counties and LEAs. The LEA's financial reporting reflects non-compliance with federal, state, and local funds. So making sure that you coordinate with your central finance office, we're going to talk about in this next category as well, and ensuring collaborative opportunities with that finance office are going to be really important for this area. So for those LEAs that do have a central finance office, whether you're an 81 Act or there's just a centralized finance office, we do know that there is, additional risk. Sometimes there's a little bit of a lack of fiscal control or reduced fiscal control by the LEA. And so because of that, we do put points towards the LEAs that have central finance offices. So you will get 10 points there. There are disconnects in communication sometimes, or breakdowns in communications with those central finance areas. So all awards, so if you get money, you have points that are associated with that. Risk and money go hand in hand. So for all of our federal grants, you can see the different categories there. For CFAs, 1 point per million. Same for ESSA, 1 point per million with a max of 10. And then for Perkins there, it's broken down. You get a max of 5 points with the lowest being 1 point if you receive any money at all. The greater the award, the higher the propensity for misspending funds. Unfortunately, there's no way to mitigate this risk. You get money, there's risk. So, yeah. All right, so drop dead, release of funds and expended funds. So any LEA that lets funds in excess of $100 drop dead, or if any funds are reverted or released back to the department, there are going to be points associated with this. 5 points for drop or release of greater than $100 per federal program area. So that's for each federal program area. We know that if you're releasing funds, that may be an indication that the grant application, the local application for Perkins, wasn't implemented as it was designed. So that could show that there is risk there. And ways to mitigate that is going to be review the needs assessments, the applications themselves, make plans to spend down those funds, and then if you have to, do those plan amendments or budget amendments along the way.
Michael, if you don't mind, I'd like to just step in here for just a moment. I know that some of our LEAs have been awarded additional funds or offered the opportunity to apply for additional funds that would not apply to the additional funds offered to LEAs. Just wanted to make that clear.
Yes. This will be funds that are at the beginning of the grant cycle. So excess carryover is our next category here. So LEAs that carry over 50% or greater from the previous fiscal year in either the IDEA Part B or IDEA preschool grants are going to be at greater risk of not spending those funds in a timely and appropriate manner. So for those LEAs, you will get 10 points per area there. Not spending on fund generators increases the risk of program noncompliance. So to mitigate this, we need to spend funds on the fund generators to positively impact those students who earned the funds. So again, going back to that plan, making sure that we're following that. We're looking for barriers in spending those funds, and whether it's a supply chain issue or that kind of stuff, we're planning on that, planning for those things on the front end. All right, so Perkins drawdown is our next area. So quarterly drawdown of Perkins basic funds are at a rate of 20 to 25% or greater per quarter. That's laid out in the risk analysis that you will be receiving soon whenever we send out the results of the risk analysis. So that's going to be expected. And again, this is the area that will be more stringent in the FY26 area. So any LEA that has less than an average of 20% drawdown per quarter is going to receive 15 points, and that's for any, all quarters, all 4 quarters. So drawdowns not taking place at least quarterly are going to be an indication again that maybe the application or plan was not implemented as it was designed, and that increases the risk. So communicating with the bookkeeper or CFO, ensuring obligations and drawdowns are occurring as required per quarter is going to be important. I know some folks tell me, well, my bookkeeper only draws down, maybe once per quarter or whatever it is. Having these conversations with them and ensuring that they understand that that increases risk of noncompliance in different areas, and that we do recommend that this happens monthly, that drawdowns happen monthly. Last category in fiscal is going to be the all deadlines area. So LEAs that miss the original budget deadline for the state budget, which is October 1st, are going to are at risk of reverting funds. LEAs must complete the CFA by August 15th and state funds final expenditure reports by October 1st to ensure all of those end of year reporting deadlines are met. And then, so for this, the risk points, you're going to, if you miss E-plan budget deadlines, you're going to get 10 points, max of 10 there. Miss the CFA or state funds FER, that's going to be 10 points with a max of 20 because there's two areas there. So not meeting the deadlines exhibits a breakdown in the process at the LEA level. So calendaring, those kind of things are going to be important here to mitigate the risk there. Communicating with folks across the central office, anybody that has any impact on this is going to be important to mitigate the risk. So now we're going to move into the cross-cutting subcategory. All right, with this one we have designations. We have SIDA, CTE, same person, Office of Civil Rights, and then Director of Schools years of experience, which I believe we've actually moved to another section. So priority and comprehensive supports and improvement schools. So we have priority schools, and federally they're known as comprehensive support and improvement, so CSI schools. These are schools that were bottom 5% of the schools across the state due to multiple years of low academic performance. So there are 15 points, a priority or CSI school identified for each one of those, or excuse me, that area. They're going to be 15 points. So federal laws, including ESSA and IDA, are going to require that there are positive trends and program outcomes as goals related to strategies and action steps. So mitigating strategies, you're going to connect with your stakeholders to create buy-in, adjust strategies that are not providing a return on investment, and then connect with your school improvement team for support in this area. Your next section is in need of improvement schools. So the TSI or additional targeted support and improvement, ATSI, are those identified based on school performance among student groups. So there are going to be 15 points for risk for TSI or ATSI schools identified. Again, just like with the last category, the federal laws say that, like ESSA and IDA, there's a requirement that there's a positive trend in those program outcomes as a goal. So again, connecting with your stakeholders to create buy-in, adjusting those strategies, and connecting with your school improvement team for support are going to be ways to mitigate strategy or mitigate risk there. For SIDA and CTE director, same person. So the same person with multiple responsibilities or job roles is going to increase your risk of noncompliance there. You have 10 points if SIDA and or CTE director are the same person. So if you have multiple job duties across the federal programs, that just is going to incur more risk. So increasing that workload, we know there's a chance that things could be missed, meetings could be missed, and that kind of thing. So attending those department PDs, seeking additional PD opportunities, sending designees to meetings when applicable, and just reaching out to support from department area experts is going to be important there. Our last category here is Tennessee OCR findings. So determination that an LEA lacked documentation and proof to comply with applicable regulations for OCR. You're going to get 10 points if an OCR complaint resulted in a finding of noncompliance. So OCR violations affect many subgroups identified in ESSA and other federal laws. So that's why this is important and significant. So to mitigate the strategy here, you're going to review your policies and procedures to ensure that practices are inclusive, consider your parents and student rights, and involve colleagues to ensure all services are delivered with fidelity. I believe I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Geneva Taylor.
You are. Thank you, Michael. All right, in our last few minutes together, let's discuss years since last monitored. So in this area, LEAs are monitored via one of 3 results-based monitoring levels. We've discussed at the top of this presentation. And LEAs receive risk points for each year since last level 3 or virtual level 3 for those that were monitored in the height of COVID. You'll receive 5 points for each year since last level 3 monitored for each federal program. However, for LEAs that have not been monitored in 10+ years, those points will be doubled. So we do have a few LEAs that it's been a moment since your risk has bubbled up enough for us to be on site. So for those of you who cannot find documentation of the last time you were monitored, this is a great indication that you will be monitored soon. To mitigate, of course, stay informed of your current requirements, be involved in PD and TA, reach out to our wonderful fiscal consultants and our oversight coordinators to ensure that you have understanding of the law. And you can also reach out to our division department folks within FPO who are program managers to ask specific questions as well. So our common questions include, well, I removed so-and-so's role after you ran this report. Can you reduce my score? No. We run this on a specific date and time. It freezes in time, and whoever is there is who is reported on. So no, we will not reduce scores for removing roles after we ran our risk analysis. I didn't mean to have ESSA and IDA directors listed, or like the same person in both of these roles. Can I take one off and you remove my points? No, because at the time, the same person could click the buttons both for ESSA director and IDA director within ePlan. And so because you have that ability, there is just an additional risk of taking on that additional role there. A lot of times when folks are identified for level 3 monitoring, a question is, am I in trouble? And the answer is no, you are not in trouble. This is an opportunity for us to really collaborate together and determine what your needs are, what you are doing well, and where we can grow from here. Is this bad? Is monitoring a bad thing? It's probably easy for me to say in my role that no, it's not a bad thing. But I hope you feel the same way. Recently, the Tennessee Department of Education has been monitored by OESE, which is ESSA, OCTAE, which is CTE, and will be monitored very soon by OSEP, which is for IDEA. And I find all of those processes very useful. It confirms that we are doing the right thing at the right time for our students and for our LEAs. And it also allows us the opportunity to see what other states are doing and receive suggestions or corrective actions if need be for us to improve our processes in the state of Tennessee. So I hope that all of you see results-based monitoring as the same type of process, that it is useful, it's participative, it's very involved. But it is really helpful to either confirm you are doing the right thing or to confirm that you weren't and give you a set of actions to take so that you are compliant with those program and fiscal processes. I'm new in this role. Why me? Can we wait a few more years? No, but I do want to again confirm that new folks, more often than not, I would say 99% of the time, as soon as we have finished that last discussion or interview, whatever you would like to call it, they say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we did this because now I know what this acronym means that I've read and could not figure out for the life of me, or now I know that the folks at the department are human and I can reach out for support. I'm not so scared anymore. You all are actually nice people. So I hope that you find the same thing to be true when we come on site for monitoring. Some folks, especially those of you that find yourself back in level 1, which is a lower risk tier, say, well, where does this put me on the list? And we do not release where you are on the list, but we do give you the reason why you were where you were on the list. Something's wrong with my score. What do I do? There will be an appeal process that you can use. So if you see, for example, that you received points for not attending the CTE meetings, but you do not have a CTE program, we are human, those of us that run this data, just like you are in your LEA. So we ask that you provide us some grace, provide us the reason for your appeal. We will check into that. And if data shows that you are correct, we will apologize, we will adjust your score. And if that adjusts your tier of monitoring, we will do that as well. Let's talk through some business rules as we are ending our time together during this session. So business rule number 1 is at the department's discretion, LEAs that were focus monitored are level 3 monitored for the impacted grants regardless of scores. So if you are an LEA that was focus monitored, we do have the ability to schedule a level 3 monitoring the next fiscal year to conduct an additional review and ensure that you're making progress in those areas that were egregiously or systemically out of compliance. LEAs receiving the largest allocations, currently Davidson, Hamilton, Knox, and Shelby participate either in level 2 or 3, depending on total risk score. The more money you receive, the easier it is for something very small to go wrong and make a very large impact for the entire state. Business rule number 3, LEAs that completed level 3 the previous fiscal year are excluded and assigned to level 1. So those of you sitting in the audience right now that were level 3 monitored last year, if you were not also focus monitored, you're going down to level 1 to give yourself time for your data to improve before you're eligible for that level 3 monitoring again. There are several state agencies that are not subject to the exact same reporting and data collections as most of you on the line. That includes DCS, our Public Charter School Commission, and DOC. So we do have them on a rotational basis. Our state-run schools also have something very similar happening. We do have them on a rotational basis as well, but at least every 5 years, whereas our state agencies were every 3. Then we move into business rule number 6. The LEA that has the highest score in the ESSA subcategory is monitored for level 3, and that's all eligible programs. So if your ESSA score is your highest at-risk score, you're still going to be monitored for ESSA, IDEA, CTE, relief, and fiscal, as well as any other applicable components. Very similarly for IDEA, the LEA with the highest subscore in IDEA, the LEA with the highest subscore in Perkins, and the LEA with the highest subscore in Fiscal are identified for level 3. And again, that is for all eligible program and fiscal components since we are a combined process. For LEAs that are not on a rotation, so not our state run, not our state agencies, if you rise to an elevated level for a 3rd year in a row, so that level 2, you keep getting level 2, and it looks like you're going to be level 2 again, we go ahead and promote you up to level 3 so that we can have those in-person discussions. We can discuss what the trends might be that are causing that risk to stay elevated and hopefully reduce your risk, get you back down to level 1, and not see that risk return in future years. Business rule number 11, at least 10% of LEAs receiving funds via the CFA are identified for level 3. And then number 12 is a new rule. So we have new number 12 for LEAs that have not been monitored in the previous 7 years via level 3 or 2. Those LEAs will be identified for at least level 2 monitoring. So if you're looking back at your paperwork and you're saying, oh, I don't know when we were last monitored, but it's been at least 7 years ago, then now you know that your notification will be at least a level 2, if not a level 3 monitoring. And then rule number 13 is between level 3 and 2, at least 20% of LEAs are identified. Looks like I am still human because I have 2 rule number 13s. This should really say rule number 14, so apologies for that. We do a random selection of 1 or more LEAs. That random has to be not monitored in person in the last 3 years. We put all of the LEAs in a random number generator in Excel, press a button, the name comes up, and it is truly a random selection. And then rule 15, everyone else that did not get identified via any of these other rules are identified for level 1. The reason for your identification is listed in your risk analysis results. So when the FY25 risk analysis guide comes out, you will see, business rule number 15 or business rule number 3 or whatever it might be listed as the reason. You can flip to the back of those risk analysis business rules and also then understand exactly why you were identified for monitoring. Just like last time, showing that fraudulent, wasteful, or abusive slide deck here. So if you heard anything and need to report fraud, waste, or abuse, hopefully you didn't, but there's the comptroller's toll-free hotline. And again, we ask that you complete a quick evaluation. Please note that in question 10, if you put session 2 or 2 risk analysis, that will differentiate this session from the previous one. And it looks like we've got 5 minutes until our next session begins. So everyone take a quick 5-minute break and we will return for conducting FY25 results-based monitoring. What LEAs need to know. Thank you all for attending this webinar, and we'll see you again in about 5 minutes.